Never in my barely 2 decades of existence did I ever think there would be a documentary that would bring me back so much nostalgia to the point where I was smiling like the Grinch. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, I'm sure you know that the Walking Dead series always has been my favorite prehistoric documentary, well, series. Despite a lot of it being inaccurate, the impact and storytelling in those episodes, whether it be walking with dinosaurs, monsters or beasts, was just unmatched. They managed to somehow show these animals in an almost movie-like fashion, while not giving it the almost movie-like plot armor. Like if something had to die, it had to die, but you'd think an actual camera crew was filming. Prehistoric Planet was a great documentary itself, much better CGI and updated information, but it still didn't really do it for me, to the point where I could put it at the Walking Dead series. Well, that was until Season 3 dropped. Prehistoric Planet Season 3 was what a younger me imagined the Walking Dead Beast series would be in the future with better quality. There's a lot more diversity and even more storytelling for many scenes. Like my channel is almost never about documentaries, well, in terms of reviewing the entire series. Like I didn't go over the new Walking with Dinosaurs or others because it didn't warrant me making a video on them personally. But this was so good I had to. I thought it would have been a 1 episode a day or a week, but Apple just dropped all 5 episodes at once. This won't be an in-depth review, I'm just gonna try my best to somehow keep this under 50 minutes. But there will be heavy spoilers, so if you don't want that, this might not be the video for you at the moment. However, despite my praise, there are definitely some things that made me pause, especially the almost plot armor-like abilities they gave some of the main animals, which don't really make sense. But I'll get more into that later on. So without taking up too much more time, let's get into it. I'll be focusing on some of my favorite segments from different episodes and some improvements they made from the other previous 2 seasons. First off, I gotta say that I love that they gave the 72 cats attention for this. They are usually overshadowed by the much more popular Ice Age predators. The same goes for the cave hyenas. There were 2 particular species of similar cats shown, well, in the ice sheets. Both are Homo sapiens, but I think there are different subspecies based on the coats and the size difference. Since the first episode is based in Eurasia, I'm going to assume that species is Homo sapiens latides, and the other one shown in the final episode, basically the Big Melt, was the North American version, being the larger Homo sapiens serum? Not sure if I'm totally right, but someone could let me know if I got that wrong. These guys are relatives of the saber-toothed cats like Smilodon, but have smaller canines that are big but can still fit within their cheeks. And for once, the documentary did not just use a woolly rhino as a background animal. Like almost every documentary before them, always used them as a reference to the woolly mammoth for some reason, and they even made them a herd animal. I don't know how accurate that is though. I found some information suggesting they could live in small family groups on occasion like white rhinos, but not really the big herds that have the cave buffalo mentality. Again, they have what I love about the Walking Dead series, being a particular individual or individuals. This time it was an elderly female and her grandson who had a close bond, and speaking of close bonds, the representation for the cave systems were top notch, showing the many different species that use these caves for shelter. A heavy focus was on the cave bears, who would be as far as a mile in the cave systems, as well as the cave hyenas that had an entire den littered with bones. But my favorite was of course the cave lions. The Siberian sized cats have a lot of evidence supporting them murking cave bears in their sleep. However, this time they apparently just got into the caves for bear cubs, which seemed a bit weird given the trouble they had to go through for 2 relatively small animals for the pair. They traveled like a mile within the cave and risked a lot by passing through a clan of cave hyena who acted like the bridge trolls, but not everything stayed in the cave for long. Like Sid, that's right, the Jefferson's ground sloth, well I think it's the Jefferson's ground sloth, makes an appearance, and they have a family dynamic that some great apes have I think. Maybe orangutans, but basically a young male, basically a teenager, stays with his mom and helps her with the newest member of the family, being the sister, for now. And they have a bunch of adorable segments with them helping each other out. My favorite segment from the entire episode was of course my favorite big cat to ever exist, Smilodon Populator, highlighting the young female who still has her milking sabers that need to shed in order for her to take on large prey, which happened to be a macrocania. This thing had a major glow up from Walking with Beast, but it's always weird how one time it did not live with Smilodon and another time it did. But the big cat movements were nailed when showing these animals hunt and also interact with each other, as after the female fails the hunt, a large male brings it down, and at first he does chase her off, but she manages to seduce him in order to get a meal, a very common thing big cats do today, including lions. The sexual dimorphism was insane though, more than likely was just because she's now leaving the sub-adult stage and he is in his prime. Arctocerium finally makes an appearance for the first time in documentary history. The South American giant could not have been made any better, and they show it doing what it likely did best, taking smaller predators' kills away with their massive size as intimidation. This time it was from wild dogs, who I assume are Stereodictis. Oh, I butchered that. We even get to see another short-faced bear species, the most popular one actually. After the sign was trying to bring down a beach-stellar sea cow, but even it could not get past the marine mammal's thick blubber before the tide came back in and saved it. Although the only existing member of this specific bear family alive today is the spectacled bear, North American species like grizzlies and Kodiaks often comb beaches for carrion or washed up animals when food is scarce, so this behavior is honestly a given. Eramosirium also makes an appearance. I found it strange that it looked as though it had mange because I don't really think there's much saying it was almost furless, but the overall design was great, especially the lumbering movements, which was the opposite of its canyon climbing distant relative. I'm not gonna lie, I do not know what species this was, because another one of my little nitpicks is that they just generalize a lot of things. They just say sloths for all of them, I think. I'd assume it's a Diablocerium, which were being pursued by some Teratornis. Think a giant caracara on steroids, and it used the method a lot of raptors today use in similar environments. Knock the animal off and let gravity do the work. And carrying on the bird train, we got to see some South American terror birds, a sibling pair of Phelopterus that ran around the male populated to steal some food, which was so refreshing to see, instead of the constant scene of giant terror birds like Titanus beefing with the saber-tooths. Not every bird was a predator though, as the giant moa and elephant bird also show up, each of which portray the males raising the chicks like reptiles today. Was a little disappointed I didn't get to see the giant lemur since the prehistoric fossil did make an appearance, but I'll let it slide. One thing I did not really expect was a full-on fight between the giant otters that used to roam Africa's plains and another similar-toothed cat. Again, they keep generalizing these things instead of giving the actual name. I thought it was Megantherion at first, but at the moment I'm leaning more towards it being a Homoserium subspecies again. I don't know, either way the interaction was really spot on if you compare the behavior to giant Amazonian river otters today. Like a group will mob larger predators and force them away, sometimes even kill them. I also can't forget the most popular species of the Ice Age being the woolly mammoths, who have the best CGI I've ever seen. You'd think this is real life. And other elephant relatives like the Columbian mammoth and the tiny stegodon. The Columbian mammoth itself had a brief run-in with the Glyptodon, who scared the herd away in a goofy yet low-key unbelievable way. Actually no, it was kinda believable. The one thing that tugged on my heartstrings though was the male Gigantopithecus, who I will call Louis. Louis, despite everything, could not find a mate because of the change in climate, and this just made his expressions sad to be honest. But his ability to use tools like a stick to fish out ants was a good touch. I lost it when he just grabbed the stick and started whacking the tree branches to get some fruit. The direwolves caught me off guard though. When I first saw them I thought it was that fox with a square face, the Tibetan sand fox. But these things are more robust than modern wolves, so it makes sense. The pack ultimately had an interaction with a female Smilodon fetalis and her cubs, who got semi-trapped after scavenging a Columbian mammoth who got stuck on the Liberia tar pits. The ocelot pattern definitely fits the fetalis though. In the land down under, we got to see Diprotodon, which has a matriarchal-like herd structure, but I was a little disappointed that it made the adult Megalania interact with a much smaller mammal instead of the Diprotodon. The Megalania though is probably the best design in the entire season, for me at least. It isn't stiff or rugged like other shows or documentaries that show it. Would have loved to see it interact with at least Procoptodon as well, but they saved those for the Thylacoleo. I've played Ark for so long that I forgot just how small the marsupial lions are. This time they have a pride-like dynamic where a group hunts together and even helps to rear young. The final creatures who made this series just that bit more special to me was the Megaloceros and Elasmoserium. The Elasmoserium itself shows off behavior akin to a lot of large mammals today, being wallowing in mud to ward off parasites and possibly even cooling off for the summer. And the Megaloceros has an action-packed scene of it running from cave hyenas, who behave exactly like modern spotted hyenas today. Basically run just enough behind the prey for it to keep going so it can tire out, and in the end, our Megaloceros male managed to escape them with a 1 in a million chance circumstance, which was it shedding its horns at that exact moment. This brings me to my personal criticisms with this season, and how much I appreciate how they try to implement the story-like feel as Walking with Beasts by telling a story with certain individuals of different species. They do too much. The Walking with series had no issue showing the predation or natural deaths of any animal, even the main focused ones. The main point at the end of the day was to show how nature actually worked, whereas for Prehistoric Planet Season 3, they gave every main animal plot armor. Like, it was so predictable, you can tell what's gonna happen after most scenes. After the third episode I just accepted that if an episode is focused on that animal, it would not die no matter what. For example, even though the sloths got basically knocked off the cliff by the Teratornis, the mother and the infant somehow managed to climb back up. When the woolly rhino grandmother gets isolated by the Homoserium pack and was almost killed, the entire herd, who were a good distance away, suddenly came back and saved the day. Same thing goes for the elephant birds. That fossil dodged the male was inches away from the chick. I was sure before the camera panned out it would die, but in the end both the father and the offspring reunite with the entire flock and lived happily ever after. The one that really made me feel a sort of way though was the mammoth infant, or infants I should say. They said it themselves that it was an extremely brutal winter that even an adult female was struggling with, yet her calf, who was not responsive when born, miraculously came back after the blizzard died down. The same thing again happens with the sandstorm and a different mammoth calf. The calf was on death's door because of the conditions and lack of milk, yet when rain started to fall on the baby, it became all better. If you didn't watch season 3 yet, you're probably thinking I'm overreacting, but no, this calf somehow just got back up despite being extremely weak because some rain fell on it for a few minutes. Even other creators who reviewed the season mentioned this too, like Animal Origins. I genuinely thought I was tripping, like I didn't want to seem like a dick. It seemed as though they were almost afraid to show the main animal of that episode or just baby in general die. Prehistoric Planet season 1 and 2 also have a similar problem, but at least they showed some deaths that honestly make sense in nature, like the Rex chick getting picked off by a mosasaur. Maybe it's because they don't want to show a cute baby mammal or bird die. The baby Procoptodon died, but that's because it was the side character to the main focus being the marsupial lion mother. Because the only other infant that died in the entire season was a Megalania hatchling that got eaten by an adult Megalania. I guess they think most people wouldn't mind because a reptile dying isn't as gruesome as a mammal, I guess, but they had no issue killing off anything that was seen as a villain. They mentioned that direwolves have a bone-crushing bite, yet one that got a firm hold on a Smilodon cub's neck for a few seconds seemingly did no damage, while the wolf instead got killed while trapped in the tar. Even with the cave lions, I don't even think cave bears had a group mentality where communities just looked out for each other. Basically, the lions got easily pushed off and one of the pair got killed by the hyenas, so predators will only win if they're the main focus and prey if they're the main focus. Another thing is the same grouping behavior for a lot of animals that were thought to have been solitary or have no direct evidence of them being pack hunters or herding animals. The woolly rhino, as I mentioned before, likely never traveled in such large herds. Marsupial lions have no evidence of them hunting in prides like lions, to the point where a female will drag a kill all the way back to the spot for every single member to feed. Not even lions do that. If one catches something without the pride there, it's just gonna eat its fill and then go back. Maybe it will call the other members later, but not drag the carcass back unless it's for the cubs. The Homocerium species are a hit or miss, but some evidence suggests that they could in fact be pack hunters, and the giant otters are the same. And speaking of Homocerium, the second biggest gripe I have is them generalizing everything. Something they did a lot in previous seasons, like they call something sauropods, hadrosaurs or troodontids, instead of just saying the species. Like they just say similar-toothed cat for everything except the Smilodon, when they could at least just say Homocerium. They tried to pull a fast one by calling Populator a saber-toothed cat and Fatalis a Smilodon, like they're both Smilodon species. Just call the South American species Smilodon Populator and the North American counterpart that came after Fatalis, even though South America had another member, but that one was Populator. They did the sloths the worst though. For every different one, they just call it a sloth. I still don't know what the exact species was that climbed the cliff. The reason I'm a little annoyed is that it's so easy to just say something like Iramocerium or just say Glyptodon for the giant armadillo they're trying to reference. I may be a mainly dinosaur focused channel and I do know a good amount of information about prehistoric life. When I'm bored, I try to see if there are any new papers coming out for a theropod or something else. Recently was Porosaurus, who is now possibly the largest crocodilomorph to ever exist. However, I'm not that in depth to the point where you could just show me any single prehistoric animal and I'd know. I'm not at that level yet. There's still a lot I don't even know. When I first saw the ground sloth, I thought it was Megacerium. The cats shown in Africa also have me a bit confused, as I still don't know if it's actually Homocerium or not. Go-to creators like the Dino Guy and the Vividan are people who know their stuff when it comes to the specifics, and I'm sure most of us watch your content when a new study comes out and they break stuff down and really dig into the specifics. But for a lot of people watching, they're not going to be able to differentiate a lot of things because of the vague names. Like how are they supposed to know the different sloth species, or what's the name of the many big cats shown, except the cave lion? Even the giant otters could have just been called Enhydriodon simply, and some of the creatures in Eurasia did not even coexist with each other and were found on opposite sides of the planet. But with all that said, the entire document series was a major step up and a lot better than I expected. And it's not like the Walking Dead series did not have its fair amount of flaws as well, even for the exact time it was released. There's no perfect prehistoric documentary, but Prehistoric Planet's Big Freeze was one of the closest things to it. Despite my criticisms, they would always be overshadowed by just how happy the entire series made me. The animation and narration were unmatched, and even though they do pull a lot of the plot armor stunts with the animals, I'd be lying if I said I didn't like it a bit. But that's just my thoughts on season 3. I personally wouldn't put this quite on the level of Walking with Beasts just yet, maybe season 4, very close, but let me know what you guys think. Could this compare to the documentary OGs of old, or is it just not quite there yet? And let me know what was your favorite animal in the comments. That's all for now folks, I'll see you tomorrow.